about time that we begin the webinar. So hello to everyone, and thank you very much for joining this anticipated webinar that we are having here today. My name is Paul Frimpong. I'm the Global Head of Membership with the ICCE. In just a few minutes, I'll tell you more about what the ICCE stands for, who we are, what we are doing, and why we think it's important that if you are in a position to be part of what we are doing, then you should take advantage of the ICCE and what we are offering. And then, of course, we will zoom into the subject of today, which is to have a webinar on a very interesting topic, looking at what is happening around the world, from the COVID-19 pandemic to what is happening in Europe. And of course, you already know the multi-lateral system that we all are known to, and of course, the rising powers that are coming into challenge, as it were, the established economic superpower. So we have a lot of nuances, and we will delve deeper into that as we are likely to have someone who is very well experienced and have more insight working along these lines for a couple of years now to share with us those insights. So from wherever you're joining us from, we say a big welcome to you. So in the chat box, we would like to know where you are joining us from. So you just mention your name and your country. Just select the everyone so that all of us can see where you are joining the webinar from. We're hoping that a lot more people join us as we progress. So before I continue and before I introduce our special guest here today for the webinar, I will just crave your indulgence to just share with you a short video which actually summarizes everything that I wish to say about the ICCE. So we have a Wuku from Ghana. So some of you are from Ghana. Please do send us the details, let us know where you are joining us from. We'd love to give you a shout out to that effect. Yeah. Okay, so we have someone too from Canada. Okay, this is Kiran from London. Okay, Botima from Ghana. We have another one from DM from Canada. Okay, that's interesting. So let us know where you're joining us from through the chat box. Please do share with us so we know your location.
Each day, we are faced with asking the most difficult questions about life, our society, and the world economy at large. The answers we seek are inextricably linked to the commitments we make and the actions we take. At the Institute of Certified Chartered Economists, ICCE, our commitment is to raise professional economists with the highest ethical standards through quality education and collaborative learning. Our global network of economists professionals are challenging conventional wisdom, advancing ideas, and contributing to the transformational agenda of the world economy. ICCE is raising economists globally, and you too can be one. Make the smart choice and become an ICCE charter holder today. Join the ICCE today and let's measure up. www.charteredeconomists.org.
Okay, so that is a summary of what the ICCE stands for. So those of you who are watching or listening, the ICCE simply stands for the Institute of Certified Chartered Economists, and it's a professional organization. It's a membership-based organization that is raising economists globally. So what the institution is doing is basically to raise economies that are highly ethical, and this is done through quality education and collaborative learning. So today, what we are having, the platform that we're having through this webinar is one of the collaborative learning opportunities that the ICCE offers. So as a membership base, of course, the first step is that you need to enroll yourself into the program. So we have the Chartered Economics program. we offer. So individuals, irrespective of which level you are, as long as you are already in the tertiary institution pursuing a degree, or you are already done with your degree, you have master's, PhD, you are a working professional, and you move in around economics, and you want to be part of the ICCE, then this would be a great opportunity for you. So it starts by becoming a member. Of course, you need to register online through the website. As the conversation progresses, I will put in the website address into the chat box so you can visit and see for yourself how you can register for membership. Now, when you register to become a member, you start from what we call a learner. So a learner is someone who is here to finish the entire curriculum of the ICCE. So we offer examinations that are structured in 3 levels, and of course, we have specialization area. So the curriculum covers many topics. Some are familiar topics that we know, macro, micro, econometrics, investment, business ethics, international trade, international finance, and all of these kind of topics. So as a learner, you are required to go through this series of examination, which is offered every month, and the exams is taken by a computer base. So you take the exam from wherever you are. So today, for example, we have Maud Jantan, who is one of our facilitators for today as an ICCE charter holder, and he took everything from his base in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So he doesn't have to go to any center. From wherever you are in the world, you can actually be a part of the ICCE and qualify yourself as a chartered economist. And we are creating various platforms for our members across the world to network, to collaborate, to learn. And of course, so this webinar is one of the channels that we've created to ensure that we create a continuous learning platform for our members. At the end of the day, it's about the kind of value that an organization like ICCE can offer to your career as a professional. Of course, you go to your traditional university to pursue your degrees in economics to whichever level that you wish. But then again, it's imperative that you are part of an association, a part of an organization that is constantly creating a platform that helps you to unlearn and relearn the new things that are happening in your industry. And by so, we, the ICCE, are positioned to help anyone that is already working as an economist, or you are aspiring to become an economist, then obviously we will encourage you to be part of the ICCE. We have so many values that we are offering our members. And when you visit our website, which I'll put in our chat box, if you haven't already visited our website yet, so you can read more about the ICCE. I'll just take the next moment to play my next video, which talks about the specialization area. So the program is structured in such a way that as an individual, you have the choice to decide which area you wish to specialize in. So we have various areas for specialization. Once you finish the initial level, which is level 1, level 2, level 3 papers, you can specialize in any field of your choice. And here we are giving various options. So let me just share a video with you, just about 15 seconds video, so we can all understand what I'm referring to. If you are watching it, to be great. But this is not audio, it's a video test. Yes, so there you have it. So these are the specialization options that we are offering our members. And again, all these are accessible globally. And so we have petroleum, energy, health, managerial, agriculture, industrial, labor, health, specialization. So these are all specialization options that are available for all our members. So once you finish the initial level 1, level 2, level 3, then you choose your area of specialization, and that is where you specialize. So you qualify as a chartered financial economist, or chartered health economists, or chartered petroleum economists, chartered energy economists, chartered health economists, or whichever area that you feel that is where you want to build your career as a professional. And one thing that we are also doing is that probably you have a lot of questions, so I'll put my email address there as well. So if you have any questions regarding the ICCE specifically, please do not hesitate to reach out. So all our learners have access to materials for free, and these materials are accessible globally. So we have a platform that it's a partnership that we have with online learning partners, where our learners get to have access to unlimited materials. So you don't have to worry about how you can get access to materials to prepare for your ICCE exams. Everything is provided for as long as you are a learner. And so that is another good news that I wanted to share. At this point, I thank you very much for granting me the audience to share this few information about the ICCE with you. So back to the order of the day. So today we are very happy and excited that we're going to be having a very important conversation. And to delve deeper into this conversation, we have very important guests and distinguished individuals that will run us through for the next, I think, 1 hour or so to have a conversation. And of course, with that, we'll definitely be encouraging all of us here to be part of this conversation. I think we've already shared a bit of information about the topic for discussion, asking if there's time for new global development system. I think through the flyer, through the emails, one way or the other, I think you've got the synopsis of what we want to discuss today. So in that regard, I believe that all of you are prepared and you have various questions that you would like to ask our speaker, and of course, through our moderator, we'll be able to address those issues. At this point, I will welcome Maud Sidet Jantan, ICCE. So he's an ICCE charter holder from Malaysia, and he is the president of the Young Global Economic Society. So Maud, I will hand over to you now so we can actually take over.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Good afternoon and good evening to all our participants tonight. And let's start for our sessions by focusing on the topic, the future of the global development ecosystems. But before we start, I would like to put some parameter of the discussion for today's webinar, where we're going to focus on the two areas. First, as we know, for the past 2 years, we have experienced of the COVID-19, the pandemic, give a huge impact on the economic and also social economy. And recently, in about the past 2 months, we have the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So today's discussion will center on how these two issues shape the global development ecosystem. So to begin with, the scientific advance in the vaccine development paving the way for the COVID-19, and we will see that they have some gap between the emerging country, developing country, and developed country. So my first question to start with, I would like to know that we see that the gap, inequalities from the vaccinations, and we see that the COVAX having proposed, that's become the one of the agency to provide the vaccination, the COVID vaccination to the emerging country and also the developing country. Is it sure that our current system, our current structure, especially on the international NGO, especially on the social community, have some of issue? So may I know that where we have been done wrong and how we can fix it? So Andrea.
Thank you, Mark. Sedek, I don't know, what do you prefer to?
Yeah, you can call me Siddiq.
Yeah, all of them. Sedek. Great, thank you, Sedek. And thank you for setting the scene for today's conversation. So I'm Andrea Ordóñez. I'm director of Southern Voice. We are a network of almost 60 think tanks or research centers across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and we will be turning 10 next year. And our goal is to strengthen the position and the perspectives from the Global South, from governments, from researchers, and other leaders on the global discussions on development, mainly around the Sustainable Development Goals. But as Cedric has highlighted, this has been really upended with the recent crisis around COVID and well, Ukraine and other conflicts that are evolving across the world. So I think it's a very good question to start with. These of vaccines, what has happened with it, and what can we learn for the development cooperation sector, development sector more broadly. So I think of course, we know the results. We all know the headlines of the disparity of the distribution of vaccines across the global south and north. But I think it's critical to go some years back and say why did we end up in this situation? So I think the first one is to reflect on how what has been pushing the market and the creation of vaccines around the world. And many of you may have heard, depending on the countries where you are, that your countries may have had until some years ago, institutions, public or private, that were producing vaccines for the local markets. But in many countries, that is not longer the case. I am from Ecuador, and I know that more than a decade ago, we haven't been producing any vaccines in our country, and that is certainly the case for many countries around the world. And one of the things that has been pushing this is the constant push for more efficiency in the market of vaccines. So there has been a push because there's a desire to increase vaccination across the world, especially in Africa, to keep reducing the prices of vaccines, which on one side can be very positive, but then now we're seeing the side effects, which is that we have taken a lot of actors outside of the vaccine market that are unable to compete, right? So we have now a very centralized system of production of a lot of the vaccines, and we see Gavi, the vertical fund on vaccination, having a lot of power in the buying end of these vaccines. So they can set the market and choose, some producers that can make some margin with the large scale of production that they have of vaccines. So how does this relate to what's going on right now? I think it's important to reflect that, what we've seen is that this push for efficiency in development has come to an expense, right? So it's good that the price of each vaccine is lower, but of course, what is the cost? What is the hidden cost of that? And I think the hidden cost of that is that we've lost that resilience to produce vaccines in many countries, right? So this was a critical aspect of the problems with the disparity in the access to vaccines that we see. And so I think looking forward and thinking, what is the type of international system and cooperation that we want in the future? I think we need to start thinking more about the resilience and how do we have systems not only that are efficient, but that are resilient and that can withstand these crises, right? So that's something that we need to keep in mind for the future, I think, and that's one of the lessons from the vaccine situation.
Okay, so we see the gap on the vaccinations from the emerging market and also from the developed market. I mean, for those who are stay in Singapore, for those who are stay in the US, and also there's a UK. I can say that they are now. I can say that for the US, they have the 4 dose currently. That's a second booster because that's I just met one of my friends back from the US, and they have a 4 dose of the vaccine, and all the 4 is from the Moderna. And when we talk about the for the other country, for example, let's say Indonesia have the issue of a lot of the vaccine, but all this vaccine is going to be expired. And another issue, there are lack of the manpower who are going to distribute the vaccine. So we see we receive for the some country, they receive a lot of the support, but execute the process, they have the problem. So this is what you mentioned just now. But in the 2022, we have another issue, which is the Ukraine-Russia crisis. And okay, we know that we need to for this discussion, I don't want to talk about the casualties, but we talk about the economic ramification, including the damage of the infrastructure, and also there's a decrease in the labor force. And we know that every time that the war happen, it will be give a huge impact on the economy, regardless Ukraine or Russia, and also the others country. Because we talk about the globalization, we talk about the globals, and this is what happening. We can't we can't be isolated from this impact. So the second question that I would like to ask from you, should the country change their development direction? Previously focus on the COVID recovery, and now there's a focus on the how to minimize the impact from the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So is it we need to change our direction, or we need to stick at our previous direction, which is a focus on the economic recovery due to the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's very tricky to have imagined that, or I don't think anybody imagined that we would go from one crisis to another one the next year, so together, so close together from each other. I think the first thing is that unfortunately, I think that for most countries, the outlook into the recovery from COVID-19 was not seen as an opportunity to transform their economic systems, right? So there has been a push to reopen, to start business as usual, but like we've seen, that's not the way to go, right? I mean, if we go back to the same economic system that we had before the pandemic, we'll have whenever we have a new crisis, we're going to have similar issues. We're going to have problems with inaccessible social protection systems, lack of possible support by governments in this crisis, little information that is available to manage such crises, and so on. So I think the first thing is that from COVID, I think that countries needed to refocus their strategy already, but I think that a lot of them did not. Now I think, like you said, the conflict, the war in Ukraine has ramifications for other countries, and a lot of them stem from some similar problems that what I was describing with vaccines, that we've been going towards a system that goes for efficiency, low prices, and not necessarily resilience, right? So when we discussed the first headlines that we were seeing about the problems with wheat around the world and the possibility of scarcity and increasing prices, on wheat, then we're wondering, well, why were we so dependent on one country generating exporting so much wheat to begin with, and why have we been developing a diet that is based on this one product, when traditionally we've been probably eating a much more diverse diet based on other types of grains and products that were available locally in different places. So I think for me, the thing that connects both COVID and the Ukraine crisis for lessons for the countries moving forward is that we need to really think more about these resilience, and how are we having systems that are more resilient to this crisis that happen beyond the borders of each country. And there's no simple question, there's no simple answer for that, but unfortunately I think that for most countries it's just a push to going back to business as usual, as we were before the pandemic.
Yeah, to add in, I would like to see that how do you see on the food security? Because that's for most of the the country highly impacted from the Ukraine and Russia conflict is on the commodity, and we know that a commodity price have been spike, and you said just now, is a weight everything one. So is it the role for the developed market to maintain the food security, to ensure that they have an alternative of the food security, and to let because it's what we see now, most of the emerging market, they are the producer of the commodity, like you say just now, the wheat, and the consumer of this commodity, most of it is from the developed market. So the one side provide the food and one side is consumed. The problem here is like what you say just now, which is I'm going to relate on the infrastructure, because most of the developed market produce the technology, produce the infrastructure, produce now we use the Zoom. We talk about the genetic modifications of the some of the commodity products, but the main issue is the accessible or to control this technology still belong to the one side, which is the developed market, not the emerging market, not the developing market. So how do you see that the balance for the community, for the country, to have the same access on the technology infrastructure, and also to control on this technology and also this infrastructure? So what can be done about the future structure of the infrastructure to support and to promote more equitable and sustainable future? How should the global development growth create more inclusive? Because we see that yes, one side talk about the philanthropy, but one side have been need to produce the food for the rich. So how we need to have inclusive growth. So how the role of the global ecosystem?
I think that you've brought a really good example with the food systems discussion globally to this case, and I think it's very interesting also, like the narratives that develop around these issues and how they have different impacts on what is done at the national and global level. So one entry point to discussing this is food security, and maybe that's what's been pushing decentralization of the production of goods, right? Because, for example, let's say the World Food Program, they buy large stocks of commodities to distribute different places. And so that centralization is all about distributing these food later on, right? But when you see a lot of the movement from farmers, from organizations in the global south, it's not only about food security. What they're talking about is food sovereignty, which is, we want the right to decide what we are, to protect the produce that comes from the different environments that we live in, all these problems with access to seeds and modification to seeds that affects the livelihood of small scale farmers around the world. So I think here we see kind of like the how these different visions collide, right? And then we see a lot in the international sector still these perspective that what needs to be done is give things to the countries in the global south, right? So it's about giving the food, not like the World Food Program, buy large stocks and give the food, not necessarily improve the agricultural system in that country. The same happened with vaccines, and African countries have been very vocal on this. They were not even given a chance to buy vaccines. It was always portrayed like, we'll need to give Africa vaccines at some point. And the thing is, it's really not about that. It's about how do we have the systems in place to produce within our own countries and regions and so on. And that has a lot to do with what you're mentioning about the control of technology and so on. And I think these are very, very tricky. These are very tricky issues, and they're issues where there are a lot of corporate interest in addition to the disputes between global north and global south. So just to feed in with the example of the food systems issues, for example, last year there was a big summit that the Secretary General of the United Nations convened on this issue of food systems. But there was a lot of concern about civil society organizations that it was the big corporations that were giving the most relevance during those processes. So there is more of a co-option of these global spaces by corporations, and this may sideline the role of smaller grassroots organizations, right? So it's very difficult, and I think the only way forward is to strengthen the political arm of countries globally. And I think in that respect, the move of Africa to have a free trade area, of having more and more political power through the African Union, is something that in the other regions of the world we should keep an eye on and keep learning from, because we need that bargaining power globally to be able to have more control of technologies and of this infrastructure that you mentioned.
And Andrea, I just want to add in, how do you see about the Sustainable Development Goals that have been mentioned by the United Nations, and how this Sustainable Development Goal have been can reduce the gap between the global south and global north?
So I think it was, when we put the SDGs into perspective, they were agreed upon in 2015.
Yeah.
And the previous goals were only applicable to developing countries, right? So it was something that was thought of by technocrats in New York about what is it that the countries in the global south need, and let's go with that agenda. So those were the MDGs. Now, by the time the SDGs came in 2015, the discussion had started to change, and we were saying, first of all, It cannot be that this is discussed closed doors by technocrats. This has to be a political process, and that's what happened within the UN system. And well, one of the difficulties of that political process is that we have an 2030 agenda declaration that has all sorts of goals, right? It's a little bit of I don't know the word, but the carnival of goals, right? There's a little bit of everything there. But the good thing is that it was politically agreed on by countries, which was not the case before. And the other thing that these goals did differently was that they are in theory applicable to all countries. Right? So it's an agenda that is not meant only for the global south, but that it can be taken forward by countries, cities, communities all around the world. So I think that was a step forward in this realization of closing the gap between the global north and the global south. Now, fast forward into now, I think we're realizing that 2015, maybe we were being too optimistic about how things were going. If you read again the declaration and the political process at the moment, it was very much optimistic. We're going to move forward. Everything's great. Collaboration, global partnership, and now, like you said, we have two crises.
It's good on the paper, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Paper, but in terms of the practicality, in terms of the how it can be give a benefit or give the opportunity to the developed country is still a question mark. So that's why it's not just a SDG, but also we talk about the COP26 and we talk about the COP15 on the ecosystem, everything one. It seems like the global north try to teach the global south on how to prevent, how to protect the ecosystem, maintain the ecology, but who the main consumer of this issue? So that's why I would like to asking, do you see that I'm not the anti-establishment, but it's more on the practicality. Is it that SDG 17 goal is too big to focus, or is it that out of the 17 of the SDG, which one that you can see is can give benefit to the developed and developing country, especially on this current scenario?
So I think that the historical problem with these agendas aligns with your concern, and it is that when it comes to the agreements on the global issues and on the role of the big economies on global development, on the global issues, then it gets watered down. Right? So we might be very ambitious about poverty, that of course we know is a goal that is focused more on the developing countries, and the social issues were it's very zero poverty. We want to reach all these very aspirational goals. But then you get to the goals, for example, around goal 17, that is around partnerships and what are we supposed to do at the global level, and they're all watered down, right? So it's not so clear indicators, who's doing what, we don't know. So it is a little bit like you're saying that that these agenda has this problem that these goals, when it comes to the global level, are watered down, and I think that the key thing for aid and the global development ecosystem to think forward is that, like you said, we are not in a position anymore where the global north can be teaching or telling the global south what to do. In many cases, actually, there's a lot to learn, right? Like, for example, climate change adaptation. Bangladesh knows much better than many countries how to manage these. They've been living with it for years, right? But there are the global north needs to focus its efforts on really thinking through again about these global challenges that have been overlooked, right? And these are very tricky issues: the governance of the digital spaces, climate change. All those are where we still need a lot of work with the global north, and that's where the focus should be, I think, for development cooperation, not so much into, like you said, necessarily telling the South what to do.
And to add in, that's for the global South and global North to be, let's say, focus on what they need to do, is need to have the engagement, more engagement between, let's say, the think tank like you guys, and also, let's say, the INGO. I mean, that's you have it mentioned in your article about the international NGO, and now that's I would like to bring the scope on the governments. And we know that when we talk about the, let's say, the think tank need to give advice to the government or provide a suggestions to the government, and it's come to the NGO who are helping to, I can say, that's solve some issue that's maybe that's the government unable to solve it or overlook. So, but the COVID-19 is really give, I can say, that's some of the issue on the INGO, and also that's the what we call it, the think tank, which is the think tank and the INGO have been talk about the subject A, while the government talk about the subject B. It's no the engagement in between that's able to react on the issue swiftly. We talk about the on the what we call it, the COVID-19, how long it takes for the government to react, and how long that's for the other party like the NGO, everyone, to have the give advice to the government. So it's fine, like two sectors have a concentrated on delivering value to very different stakeholders, aligning around different objectives, operating at the different speed, and also frequently speaking quite different language. So what I want to get from you is how the private sector, NGO, and also there's a public sector can collaborate effectively and develop multilingualism and fully understand the value that other brings. Because now we see that yes, when we talk about the COVID, for example, the global South have been pushed to accept whatever vaccine have been provided by the global North, and it's no I can say that's what we call it, the accountability to select or responsibility to involve on this selection. We just more on the receiving. So how now, or maybe that's in the next 2 to 5 years, that's both party, private sector, government sector, and also that's NGO / the think tank can be collaborate together, engage, and provide the same value to the others.
So I think that one of the problems that we see with the way that these different organizations work also is that I think that when we have joint work, we cannot lose track of the accountability processes in it, right? So, for example, we cannot say, okay, the government, the private sector, civil society are going to work on an equal footing, let's say in a country, right? Because actually the government has been democratically elected in many countries. It is accountable. It should be the one that is responsible for different the delivery of different services and so on. So we shouldn't forget about that in the process of collaborating, right? Because sometimes the inclusion of other actors dilutes this, and that's also not good, because the government should be kept accountable for what they are responsible for, of coming up with policy, delivering the basic public services, and so on. But of course, this doesn't mean that there is no space of collaboration, but that those spaces should be clearly on like what's the end and what is the objective of those collaborations. And I think, for example, in the experiences of think tanks many times, what they struggle with, like you said, is having the same kind of interests from what the governments are talking about, right? And the motivations may be different, right? So yes. It might be that a think tank, a researcher is more interested in producing a research output that meets certain criteria, and not so much with the concerns from the government. I think that COVID has been interesting in that sense, because I've seen, for example, in our network, that think tanks have had to adapt their strategies, and some of them have been able to deploy their capacities, their analytical skills, for supporting the government, but not necessarily in the way that they were used to, right? Not necessarily in producing a research paper or organizing a conference, but for example, helping processing high volumes of data to understand the problem better, and so on. So I think it would be interesting to have this as a question to be learned from the pandemic, right? What were the strategies that were useful for creating this multilingualism that you're mentioning between the different types of organizations. The other thing that I think came up clearly from COVID was that it was really the grassroots organizations, not like the INGOs or even large-scale national NGOs, that were the best place to respond to community needs, right? It was really grassroots organizations that were well placed to respond to the crisis. And so that should also gives us a sense, like moving forward, that these smaller organizations are really important in keeping the social fabric of different communities and so on. And they've been also overlooked in the last years in the development discourse.
And we have a question from our audience. Let me read for you. That's a question from the Dr. Samuel. The inequalities continue to widen. More rhetoricals of the political assurance are sounded all over. How should these deprived nations look at their redevelopment strategy in bringing the gap?
So I think this is more about how would governments rethink their development strategy? Would you say, Sadek?
Yeah,
right?
Redevelopment strategy.
Yeah. So I think this relates a little bit back to the first area of our discussion of, what should be the focus, what are some of the issues that countries should focus on, that have come up after COVID. And I think I think it's important that countries, that we all kind of like challenge some of the assumptions we've been making on the development path that has been kind of like the mainstream agenda, right? So I think, for example, one of those issues, just to give an example, is this conception of the informal sector in the economy, right? And then we've been hearing this discourse for decades now that we should be formalizing the informal sector, all this push for, and then now it's been even more clear. There's like countries where actually the norm is the informal sector, right? It's a minuscule part of the economy that is within what we call the formal sector. So this category, for example, of understanding the economy for many of our countries, it's not really that useful, right? So for example, now in rethinking development, our development plans, the way forward, it's really important to think through these categories and challenge them as well, and say like, well, this notion of formal informal economy doesn't apply that well to my context. How can we understand the market, the labor market differently, and think through changes that would be meaningful, right? Is it really that we want to be formal, informal? Is that really the most important variable, or is it more about decent work? It's more about the stability of companies, of keeping them alive for longer first. I mean, there's some other issues that we could discuss here, but I think what I would say is that it's really important that governments and all of us, when we're thinking about kind of like development pathways, we're thinking through the lessons of COVID, thinking, what things don't make any sense anymore for the way we're thinking about development, and trying to work around those.
Pretty clear. So for our audience, please send your question through our Q&A buttons. We will read the questions and the speaker can answer your question. So move to my next question. We have the NGO, we have the the think tank, and some of the think tank and also the NGO rely on the funding from the private sector or from the donations. But COVID-19, I can say that even the private sector, they are quite struggle in terms of the financials, and the impact, lack of funding for this what we call it, the think tank and also the NGO. And I would like to see on your view on how to reform the NGO funding so we can deal the threat like COVID-19, meaning to say that we have a sufficient funding to run the event, to run the the impact at the business as usual. So how that we can reform this NGO funding?
So I think, of course, there are many different types of organizations that are funded very differently, but I think for here we could focus maybe on those that are funded mainly through international cooperation first. And I think that and here it comes back to our previous discussion of the important role of grassroots and smaller organizations in their response to COVID. What we've seen all along in the development sector is that big philanthropy, but also governments with their bilateral cooperation, rely on large organizations, usually that are based in their countries, to manage funds and then give them back to the countries. And then you see how the funding waters down. And also that's when you see that organizations have to do all these magic to make their agenda, their to make sure that they're that they fulfill their mission, while at the same time that they are fulfilling some goals that come with the funding that they receive. And this is not a very practical way of funding organizations. At the same time, we know that there are the development community has agreed on effectiveness principles of how development cooperation and work with NGOs and local organizations should work. And there is an agreement that ownership by the local organizations and actors is really important for development. Now the question is, how do you make that happen, right? And I think here's where we really need those reforms in the funding schemes that are some out of the box thinking, I think, for the donors, but that I think could make a big difference. So for example, right now, like I said, most of the funding goes through intermediaries. Maybe there's a way of cutting and some of those intermediaries in the process of funding smaller local communities. That would also increase the funding availability. It could also follow a method by which the agenda, the issues are set by the local organization, and then you say, if you still want, for example, collaboration between North and South or big organizations, but you could say, okay, let's say a small organization, you will have these funds, and you could choose to work with Oxfam, with these other organization, with these other organization. Who do you choose to work with? And so you're changing kind of like the power dynamics and those I think are the critical things in the funding schemes, that at the end of the day, right now, we still have this process where the local NGO is the last pillar in a value chain, and we should try to change it around somehow.
It just like additional questions on the funding and also that's the NGO. How do you see the big corporations? Okay, we can talk about the likes Microsoft. We can talk about the likes George Soros, who having been known as a philanthropist. And how the successful of the philanthropy? Are they really know the area they cover is give a huge impact to the community? Or before this this webinar, I have a quick read on the Guardian newspaper that say that the philanthropy, they have a specific focus, which is at the end of the day, this kind of the specific focus will help their corporations. Meaning to say that they create the funding, they provide the grant, and also that's the scholarship to the young people to study at the Ivy League University. And after that, these young people will be work with them. So it's really the same circle and same all the circle is keep on coming. It's no expand to the others people. It's not expand to the a bigger sector. So in your opinion, is the corporate who run their own philanthropy are successful, or they need to provide the funding they have to the NGO and the well-established NGO, and also that's the think tank who are really 24/7 do the impact?
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, it's how can a philanthropic organization be or not be successful, right? And should that really matter that much, like you said? When in reality, these funds should be really about transferring of resources to other organizations and taking risks that are not taken by other actors, right? So when you have this push for showing impact by this big philanthropy, maybe that's also a push towards keep working with the same actors, right? So you don't take chances with other organizations, you go with the same ones that you already know. But I think this can be changed by, you know, the organizations, for example, that have more flexible funding, that fund organizations based in the countries where they work over organizations from the global north. So I think, of course, the philanthropic sector has it has a lot of challenges in these, but some of these changes in funding mechanisms and so on can be helpful for these issues.
Certainly. I would like to, while we don't have any question from the audience. My perhaps this is my final questions on this webinar. Does the new global superpower like China, like maybe we can say that's a South Korea, and also that's some others country in the global south, foreshadow a change in the conventional development agenda? Is this, we see that the new country like China become the superpower, can provide or can either can be a pro and cons to the conventional development agenda?
I think that it's an important change in the discussion on development, that the new role of these actors and South-South cooperation. I think on the good side of them, when you see the research around what governments in Africa and so on think about the role of China and other new donors, what you see is that they value the variety of donors, right? So it reduces kind of like the risk of countries of being dependent on only one type of donor. It also allows them to negotiate a variety of different sectors, right? So we know, for example, that even though there's a lot of concerns about the social and environmental impacts of infrastructure supported by China, for example, they are interested in supporting infrastructure. That has been a gap that most Western governments have not been interested in financing in the global south. So I think in general, the governments see the introduction of these new powers as positive for their capacity to negotiate, for their capacity to have more of a saying on what gets done, because they can have different fundings for different sorts of activities. And I think you see it as a result then on what's happening politically in the discussions around Ukraine, right? That a lot of countries in the global south are saying, well, we need to kind of like keep the relationships going with the different actors. We cannot just marry to one, because that's not the solution for us. So I think that's what has happened, and where we see some changes coming up.
And Andrea, my really last question to you: what you wish to see for the global south, especially the think tank, in the next 2 to 5 years? What you really want to see? Just your wish.
Well, my wish would be to really have stronger regional integration. I think that's a critical component of strengthening our position globally. And like I said, I very much follow and look forward to seeing how the trade agreement in Africa works, how the African Union keeps strengthening its position, and I think there's much to learn for the other regions on these. And I think if we can move towards stronger regional agendas, that would be progress for the global South, because I think it's naive to think that individual countries will be able to have such a big influence in a global environment where we have such the big powers, right? And now with Europe united under the European Union, and the fact that they've also been strengthened because of Ukraine, it just shows a little bit more the path forward, that we really need to strengthen regional cooperation to have more of a saying in some of these issues that we've been discussing today.
Thank you, Andrea, for your time. Thank you for all participants. Now back to you, Paul.
We cannot hear. Oh, there you are.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Maud and Andrea. I think that has been very insightful. I think we didn't get much of questions from the participant, but I'm sure they really enjoyed the insight. And I think Maud did a great job because of his background. And of course, Andrea, so much insight that you shared with us today. The good news is that this webinar has been recorded, and of course, in due time, we'll make it available on our YouTube channel. Of course, we will share it via email to all participants that registered and joined us. And so we thank you very much for being part of this conversation. I mean, the ICCE, we are constantly creating such a learning platform for everyone that's interested in the topics that we are discussing to be part of it. So Kiran is saying that, okay, he had a background, but thank you very much. All right, sure, Kiran, you're welcome. We're excited that you could join us for today's webinar. And so we have other webinars. You can always visit our website. I think I did put it there. Let me just put it there again. So it's charteddeconomist.org. You can visit the website. We have a couple of other events coming up. We have a global conference coming up in Mumbai later in the year, called the Global Economic Ideas Festival, where we are hosting policymakers and of course, executive level managers and government ministers and all of that in Mumbai for the Global Economic Ideas Festival. Of course, with this, I will later on send an email to Andrea so that we can see how Southern Voice can collaborate, because it's basically in line with what your team is doing around the world to help shape the conversation around the global South. And this conference actually focuses on emerging markets, really. So we're bringing policymakers from multilateral institutions. So we have people representing from the World Bank, the IMF, the Asia Development Bank, the African Development Bank. They are representing at this conference. So hopefully we can get to collaborate with you and your team, our Southern Voice, to see the way forward. So once again, thank you very much, Andrea, so much for being with us today. We so much appreciate your time and your insight. Maud, thank you very much. I think you should be doing this more often for the ICCE, seeing that you've done a great job today. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, our audience, for joining us, and we'll come again soon via email with updates of what's happening in the space of global development. Thank you. Thank you for being part.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrea.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Each day, we are faced with asking the most difficult questions about life, our society, and the world economy at large. The answers we seek are inextricably linked to the commitments we make and the actions we take. At the Institute of Certified Chartered Economists, ICCE, our commitment is to raise professional economists with the highest ethical standards through quality education and collaborative learning. Our global network of economists professionals are challenging conventional wisdom, advancing ideas, and contributing to the transformational agenda of the world economy. ICCE is raising economists globally, and you too can be one. Make the smart choice and become an ICCE charter holder today. Join the ICCE today and let's measure up. www.charteredeconomists.org